Russia is cracking on all fronts, and the cutdown has begun. From Crimea, where human rights have hit rock bottom, to Engels and Saratov, where Ukrainian drones are rewriting the rules of war, the Kremlin is running out of time. Ukrainian strategy is working, Putin's empire is collapsing, and panic is spreading across Russia. Welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Zorislava Kolesnikova. Stay tuned. We'll show you why Ukrainians' victory is no longer a question. Human rights in Crimea approaching zero. Life under Russian occupation has turned into a nightmare. In Crimea, the level of human rights is approaching zero. Peaceful women, mothers and students are being preserved simply. Life under Russian occupation has turned into a nightmare. In Crimea, the level of human rights is approaching zero. Peaceful women, mothers and students are being preserved simply for being Ukrainian or Crimean Tatar. Ukrainian human rights defenders record new cases of arrest, torture and intimidation every single day. How far will Moscow go in this campaign of repression, and can the world stop it before it's too late?
The level of human rights in occupied Crimea is approaching zero. Every day, Ukrainian human rights defenders document crimes, victims of repression, peaceful women, mothers and female students.
The Russian Federation knows perfectly well that as long as the indigenous population remains absolutely united, they will not in any way succeed in their endeavors. They will not be able to resist, to strengthen or to take root. That is why there is constant pressure on the indigenous population through intimidation, repression, persecution, and the imposition of heavy sentences, or through extrajudicial executions when a person goes missing and their relatives have no idea what happened to them.
Mass detentions and arrests in Crimea by the Russian security services began in 2014. Experts note that now the repressions have also become demonstratively brutal.
All these extensive searches, numerous detentions, and unduly harsh sentences are being carried out primarily to suppress internal public opinion that is in favor of the Russian Federation and its policies. This will only intensify.
Since the start of the full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian security forces have initiated several times more criminal cases against Crimeans than during all the previous years of the peninsula's occupation. Most of the courts are closed, where security forces openly abuse the defendants and seek to hand down the harshest possible sentences.
As of today, the law of the Russian Federation is in effect there. It has no reverse function except for one thing: repression, repression, and more repression.
If before February 2022 there were only 5 known cases against women with an obvious political motive, then after the invasion began, the occupiers have already opened 31 new ones. And this does not include abductions, religious cases, and proceedings against women living in the newly occupied territories.
There's nothing surprising about this because the Russian repressive machine operates exactly in this way whenever necessary. In order to sway public opinion in favor of Russian propaganda, they specifically target women, the elderly, and children. The same practice was used in Chechnya. Many times I personally saw how people who were in the same cell with me were forced to accept the conditions imposed on them because in the neighboring cell, either their sister or their wife was being held.
Women are given sentences that are average or the maximum possible term. The occupation courts demonstratively ignore mitigating circumstances such as age, having children, or caring for elderly parents. Judges often mock the defendants, commenting on their appearance and physical condition, and also restrict the defense's right to present evidence and call witnesses.
Before a person ends up imprisoned by them. Beforehand, a criminal case against this person is already prepared. And it's never the case that when you end up in court, the judge studies your case just a couple of days before. No, the judge knows from the very beginning that you will end up before them. The judge knows from the start exactly what sentence they will give you. There are no human rights here, no convention works at all, absolutely. Only one thing works here. They have a kind of slogan: if you ended up with us, it means you're guilty.
On October 15th, it became known that mass searches were carried out in the homes of Crimean Tatar women in occupied Crimea.
The search warrant was not shown to the family. The search was even conducted in the children's room. Then the security forces went down to the basement. 2 phones were confiscated. While Nemetuleva was packing her things, the security officers followed her every step. In the end, the detainee was brought to the FSB office at 7 a.m., 3 hours after the security forces arrived.
FSB officers detained 4 women: Esma Nemetulaeva, Nasiba Saidova, Elviza Alieva, and Fivzia Osmanova.
The only thing left now is to document and to speak out about it, about what is happening there, and to help in any way possible, either by getting this person out of the area or by providing some other kind of assistance. But one thing is very important, that the Ukrainian military structure does not postpone the deoccupation of these regions.
Ukraine strongly condemns yet another wave of repressions by Russian occupation authorities in Crimea against the indigenous Crimean Tatar people.
Propaganda media are spreading fabricated accusations about a women's cell allegedly promoting the ideas of a global caliphate, trying to justify the repressions and portray peaceful women, mothers, educators, and students as terrorists. Such actions are part of Moscow's systematic offensive against the Crimean Tatar people, aimed at destroying their national identity, spirituality, and right to their own land.
This demonstrative cruelty has a clear goal: to intimidate the Crimean population and suppress any manifestations of resistance. In 26 out of 31 cases, the repressions are directly linked to Ukraine.
I strongly condemn these actions of the Russian occupation authorities, which are yet another manifestation of a deliberate repressive policy and discrimination against representatives of Ukraine's indigenous people, the Crimean Tatars, on national and religious grounds. Such illegal searches and arrests are intended to intimidate the local population. They serve as a covert means of forcing the Crimean Tatars out of the peninsula.
The harshest sentence, 22 years in a penal colony, was given to a resident of Sevastopol. Nadezhda Grekova, who was accused of attempting to assassinate a Russian military official. As of September 2025, the occupation authorities are illegally holding at least 30 Crimean women in Russian penal colonies and detention centers.
Not a single crime committed by the occupiers will go unpunished. Crimea was and remains a part of Ukraine, and those who persecute Crimean Tatars today will inevitably be held accountable under international law.
The repressive system on the occupied peninsula is a tool for demonstrative intimidation and punishment, where even young women, mothers, and the elderly become the Kremlin's next targets in its campaign to suppress any form of loyalty.
Time runs out for the Kremlin. Ukraine holds the advantage. Time is no longer on Putin's side. Western journalists who visit Ukrainian frontline position conclude that in a long war of attrition, Ukraine's change of victory far outweighed Russia's. Kyiv's strategy, calculated, disciplined, and relentless, is slowly but surely grinding down the enemy. Can the Kremlin survive a war it can no longer control? And how long before Russia's resources and morale finally collapse?
Time is no longer on the Kremlin side, and in a prolonged standoff, Ukraine's chances of winning the war are much higher than Putin's. This is the conclusion reached by Western journalists who visited the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces.
Ukraine's carefully considered and meticulously executed strategy in the ongoing and brutal war of attrition, a conflict defined by sustained combat and the gradual wearing down of opposing forces, is now demonstrably showing a series of truly unexpected and quite significant results.
Constant enemy losses and the adaptation of the Ukrainian armed forces to modern combat tactics, analysts assert, are opening up opportunities for Kyiv's long-term victory. Russia was counting on a rapid advance in northeastern Ukraine. However, key cities and logistical hubs remain under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. By the fall of 2025, Russian generals are capturing Ukrainian towns and villages only in words and in fake reports for the man in the bunker.
It is clear that the Russian army is unlikely to be able to accomplish these tasks. But General Gerasimov, the chief of the General Staff, according to certain leaks that have appeared on social media, reported to Putin about the latest successes of the Russian troops. In particular, he claimed that the grouping of Ukrainian armed forces near the Lebenbek Reservoir had been destroyed, which is not true. And in addition, he stated that Russian troops are clearing the southern districts of the city of Kupiansk, which is also not true.
What is actually happening in the long-suffering but still unyielding Kupiansk was shown by the operators of the 8th Special Operations Forces Regiment. The enemy in this direction truly does not stop trying to break through the Ukrainian defenses. In the Kupiansk direction, there were at least 8 attempted attacks by the occupiers over the past day. However, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to thwart the enemy's plans to advance. The defense forces repelled assault actions in the areas of Petropavlivka, Novoplatonivka, Pischanove and Stepova Novoselivka. Using strike FPV drones, the occupiers were driven into the nearest building, after which the operators cleared several structures where the enemy had taken up positions. The occupiers are also having a tough time today in the Zaporizhzhia direction. There, partisans from the Atesh movement helped destroy a mobile enemy command post. Concerned citizens provided the exact coordinates of the occupiers' communications vehicle, which was being used as a mobile command post to control enemy units. The destruction of this communications hub caused chaos in the occupiers' command system. Coordination between units and the transmission of orders were disrupted, which seriously affected the enemy's combat capability in this sector of the front. And here are the images of a burning fuel and lubricants depot belonging to the occupiers in the northern Slobozhanshchina direction. In the past few days, our border guards have managed to destroy enemy hideouts and communication equipment. In addition, the enemy in the northern Slobozhanshchina direction has also suffered personnel losses. Overall, in this and the Kursk directions, Ukrainian defenders repelled 7 Russian attacks. The enemy carried out several airstrikes on our positions, dropping a total of 9 guided bombs and conducting 198 artillery shellings. The situation remains difficult in the Lyman direction. There, the enemy attacked 12 times, attempting to advance near the settlements of Srednya, Novoselivka and Derilova. Nevertheless, a special unit of Ukrainian military intelligence is managing to accurately and effectively destroy enemy forces, their equipment and drones. Due to heavy losses in this and other directions, Russian forces have been forced to slow down their offensive pace, military analysts explain.
As a result, Russian activity on the front decreased somewhat in September. The number of assaults they carry out drops in direct proportion to their personnel losses.
The official Ukrainian statistics also do little to encourage the occupiers to launch these meat grinder assaults. Thus, September 2020 stood out as a showcase moment for the effectiveness of National Guard units. It was a particularly telling period for the performance of the National Guard units. Thanks to the coordinated efforts of the guardsmen, the enemy lost at least 677 vehicles, 418 artillery systems, nearly 200 radar stations, 17 multiple rocket launchers, 29 tanks, and almost 70 ammunition depots over the past month. Meanwhile, the Russian army continues to strike exclusively at civilians and residential buildings. And it should be noted that this is happening not only in Ukraine. Recently, Russia's much-vaunted air defense system hit a residential building in the Belgorod region with a missile. The video shows the upper floors of the apartment building taking the hit. As a result, according to Russian media, windows were blown out in 15 apartments. 24 parked cars were damaged, and officially, there were no casualties. However, judging by the footage published online, the destruction of the building may be much more serious.
Massive drone strike hits Engels and Saratov, Russia in panic. A powerful Ukrainian drone attack shook Engels and Saratov overnight. The strike came in two waves, forcing the close of the local airport. Residents across the Volgograd region were jolted awake as explosions echo through the night sky. Russia's air defense is struggling. Is this just the beginning of a new wave of deep strikes across its territory?
A powerful attack by Ukrainian drones, Engels and Saratov came under attack, which occurred in two waves. Due to the UAV attack, the local airport was closed. Residents of the Volgograd region also couldn't get any sleep that night. There, the Balashovskaya electrical substation was attacked. A number of settlements in the region were left without electricity. The nightmare for the aggressor country doesn't end there. If partners help with funding, by 2026, Ukraine will be able to produce 20 million drones.
At the moment, Ukraine's defense forces are using the so-called drone wall tactic. According to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Syrskyi, the width of the so-called kill zone reaches up to 10 kilometers. It is precisely the mass use of FPV drones that allows Ukraine's defense forces to neutralize the occupiers' advantage in manpower and equipment.
The President of the United States called on the Russian dictator to stop killing Ukrainians and Russians. In addition, Trump mentioned an offensive that he plans to discuss with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky.
We will talk to him about the war. They want to go on the offensive. I will make a decision regarding this, but they would like to go on the offensive.
The point is that Trump is already commenting on the successes of Ukraine's defense forces after the fact. This is about the counter-offensive in the Zaporizhzhia direction. 3 settlements have been liberated: Shcherbaki, Malye-Shcherbaki, Stepovoy, and accordingly, the counter-offensive of Ukraine's defense forces in the Dobropoli direction. 7 settlements have been liberated. In the Pokrovsk direction, Ukraine's defense forces have also achieved successful actions. Over the past day, there have also been successful actions by Ukraine's defense forces in the Sumy direction.
Consequences for Russia. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth warned the Kremlin in the event of a lack of progress in a peaceful resolution of the war. And Ukraine's partners in NATO have developed new defense equipment for our country and are now conducting its final testing.
This is about military political pressure. Military pressure means transferring strike weapons to Ukraine, primarily Tomahawks and accordingly American Rams with a range of 450 kilometers. But what's notable here is their quantity, 3,300. This quantity will effectively nullify the logistics of the Russian occupation army directly on the territory of the Russian Federation itself, and will allow Ukraine's defense forces to neutralize Russian military-industrial complexes within the Ram's strike zone.
If Tomahawk missiles are supplied to Kyiv, they will be operated by American military personnel. Ukrainians will not even be trained to use these missiles, according to journalists from the Financial Times.
Not only will there be the automatic transfer of Tomahawk cruise missiles, but also accordingly the exchange of intelligence data. In other words, targeting instructions will be provided by American partners. But most importantly, in military situations, the operators of the cruise missiles will be the United States. And let me remind you, previously the Russian Federation used rhetoric claiming that the transfer of Tomahawks would automatically make the United States a party to and participant in the war. Therefore, the United States is making it clear that this rhetoric from the Russian Federation is not considered a serious argument by them.
An incident resembling a provocation worthy of the Russians occurred in Poland. During the exercises in which the Netherlands also participated, cars with Belarusian license plates were spotted. A few minutes later, drones appeared over the base, causing communication disruptions. It was not possible to determine their origin or operators.
After the appearance of the unidentified drones, the exercises were halted. Then, electronic warfare systems were redeployed from the Netherlands, which subsequently made it possible to bring these joint exercises to a logical conclusion.
The Kremlin is not giving up on the idea of persuading the US to refrain from supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. This is reported by analysts from the Institute for the Study of War. In addition, it is noted that the Russian Federation continues to make efforts to separate the US from Ukraine and Europe, as well as to undermine NATO's unity.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you stand with the truth, like, share and subscribe. Your support keeps us fighting on the information front, exposing the Kremlin's lies and amplifying Ukrainians' voice to the world. Stay strong, stay informed and stay with Ukraine.